Begin tonight with the political standoff in Kenya over its presidential election. There is confusion as to how many people actually turned out to vote and what that figure means for the legitimacy of the poll. Many boycotted the election after opposition leader Raila withdrew. And voting never even took place in some opposition strongholds after violent clashes. Let's get perspective from the government there. Kenyan Deputy President William Ruto joining me now live from Nairobi. And let's begin with this confusion, sir. There seems to be about voter turnout figures. When will the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, the body charged with releasing the official data, give the final tally?
There is actually no confusion about the figures that were announced by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. The confusion, or the so-called confusion, arose from the figures which were peddled around by Mr. Odinga that only 3.5 million Kenyans showed up to vote. The reality is that 7.6 million Kenyans woke up early in the morning, went to the polling booths and voted. And shortly, the Electoral Commission, either later today or early tomorrow morning, they will be announcing the results and giving a clear indication of the voter turnout.
Oh, good stuff. All right, so it's late today or early tomorrow. And of course, we must clarify for our viewers' purposes, the turnout is disputed by all parties at present, so we must await that official figure as we get a result. Why, sir, have you and others broadcast numbers ahead of the official result, out of interest?
It is not us. We have numbers from all our tallying centers around the country. Independent media houses, a very critical plank of our democracy, have on their own independent figures from tallying centers around the country. And of course the IEBC, as the body legitimately given the mandate to undertake this exercise, have numbers. All these numbers are agreeing. They are only disagreeing with the numbers given by Mr. Odinga, who is perennial, in fact, pathological liar about numbers, or peddler of untruths.
Mr. Ruto, I guess it does, though, beg the question, doesn't it? Why not wait for the official tally, especially at a time of heightened political sensitivity?
All of us are waiting for the numbers, Becky. We are in no hurry. The legitimate body that will announce these results are in charge of this process. They have, we are waiting as candidates, and shortly the numbers will speak for themselves.
Your critics have said that the police have been too heavy-handed in their dealings with opposition producers. Your reaction, if you will?
It is unfortunate every other time, Becky, a Kenyan dies as a result of violence. And we regret any death that has happened. I think about 6 people have lost their lives. Every death that happens in Kenya is investigated, both by the police and by an independent oversight authority. However, much of this violence is orchestrated. It is sponsored. In fact, in 9% of our country, Kenyans did not have the chance to vote because Mr. Odinga organized militia in those areas to prevent election officials and election materials from getting to polling stations and denying the chance for Kenyans to vote in those areas, claiming that those Kenyans don't want to vote. It is not for him to decide whether Kenyans want to vote or not.
Mr. Ruto, do you have any evidence to prove that the opposition is creating this violence?
Becky, on Wednesday, Mr. Odinga announced that he was transforming his political party called NASA to a resistance movement, which unfortunately, as we have witnessed in the strongholds of the opposition a lot of violence has been occasioned on election officials, on election material, against the police, some trying to snatch weapons from the police, others attacking police stations. It only means that Raila Odinga, who has a track record of violence from 1982 to date, and he has now transformed his political outfit into a resistance militia. Instead of, in his sunset years, ascending to the levels of Nelson Mandela, who are democratic icons, he has descended into the abyss of the likes of Joseph Kony, who are basically guerrillas and people who use violence as a means to get their political ends.
Mr. Deputy President, one person who hasn't supported this election, of course, is the opposition leader, Raila Odinga, who sat out the vote and called on his supporters to do the same. Here is what he told CNN just a few days ago. Have a listen.
We are creating another wing, which is the resistance movement. This is basically going to be involved in civil disobedience, civil resistance, not an armed resistance. So we are going to use all the legal and constitutional means to put pressure on this government to do what we want them to do.
What is your message to any Kenyan that heeds Odinga's call and participates in civil disobedience?
We are telling the people of Kenya, starting with Mr. Raila Odinga, that violence is not an option in Kenya. They say it's only fools who don't learn from their mistakes. We had a situation in Kenya in 2007, 2008. We would be idiots to go back to that situation. And when Mr. Odinga says it is unarmed, if you look at the TV screens in Kenya and outside Kenya, all these people whom Mr. Raila has recruited as militia are armed. They have rocks, they have stones, they have catapults, they are attacking police stations. Last night, he exported that violence from Nyanza, where the region he comes from, and now that violence has he exported it to Kawangware. Some houses were burned yesterday in Kawangware by a militia group that were chanting "No Raila, no peace." That is not what we want in Kenya. We want to move ahead. The people of Kenya have decided we are a constitutional democracy where the people are supreme.
Okay, let me ask you this. If your party were to lose this election, would you accept the result? Were you to win, will you enter into dialogue with the opposition? Where does Kenya go from here?
We are Democrats. We believe in the rule of law. We didn't agree with the Supreme Court annulling our win. But because we respect the Constitution and institutions set up by the Constitution, we agreed to go back to a re-election. And that is why we went into this repeat election. We will abide by the decision of the people of Kenya. As for engaging Mr. Raila in discussions, we are an open society. We speak to all citizens. We will speak to Mr. Odinga the way we speak to all other Kenyans on forging a way forward. We are ready to discuss with him. We are even ready to discuss with him his retirement package.
Right. Well, we will be speaking to Mr. Raila Odinga as and when we get the results. All sides of this story, of course, here on CNN for the time being, and ahead of those results, we thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. Well, turning now to an overwhelming